Hi, everyone. Welcome to another episode of The Missing Manual. I'm Julia.
And I'm JCK. It's lovely to meet you.
Thanks for joining us today. So one of the topics that I feel like I keep swimming around, Jenny, is all the work that happens outside of any system, whether it's your HRIS system or your ATS system or your procurement system. There is a lot of work that happens outside the box because a lot of these technologies are built so that many customers can use them. You're not buying a custom solution when you buy something. And so then you're trying to either make your process fit the machine. And when you do that, sometimes there's things that are left that don't fit in the machine that you then have to create manual work around. And it's been something that I've always been passionate around, and I'm hearing many other voices talk about it lately. And so I keep coming back to it, of those issues and work that gets done outside of any system that sits in people's inboxes or Excel spreadsheets or many times in their head.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I think, historically, it's been something, to your point, that was an issue because the systems that we were using were one size fits all. They weren't one size fits one. And so we put as much as we could in the system, but then we had all the processes that needed to continue, whatever it was we were doing that had to live outside of the system. And now we're at this interesting point in time where that's starting to flip. But the only way to flip it the right way, to be able to have, again, because technology today is a lot easier to build something one size fits one. So you can have somebody who's an FTE on a team, or a bespoke provider who can just build you your suite of one that works exactly within your processes. But in order to do that, you have to first map what the current state looks like, because otherwise you can't reverse engineer building something that's genuinely going to work, right?
And Mike Hennessy, so for those of you who aren't familiar with Mike was the founder of Smashfly, Smashfly started as job distribution, early days. So I've known Mike a long time and was a customer of Smashfly for many years at several different organizations, but started with job distribution and then moved into the CRM and then recruitment marketing space. And Mike's been talking to a lot of HR leaders around this topic and been posting on LinkedIn pretty frequently about some of the insights and conversations he's having. And he is working on an audit tool with his new company, Grace Blocks, that he and his wife, Mary Grace, started. And they're looking at how can you audit and capture all of these outside of a system processes. So I love the work that he's doing there. I wish there was like an easy button way to get at and map all of that. I think you've, Jenny, worked with or are familiar with some tools that can help audit inside of specific system, all of the process mapping, but the getting at all of the things that are happening outside can be daunting and overwhelming, I think.
It can 100% be daunting and overwhelming. And yes, I have been working with a couple clients specifically on CRMs. A lot of people have CRMs and they're not optimized properly. Like you get a pretty big engine and you use like a tiny little bit of it. And so been working to map the current state and then create projects within Claude so that any changes that need to be happened can be done in browser via the AI agents, which has been pretty cool. But I have one of my clients, he's in the insurance private adjusting world. And I was coaching him on being able to use Claude. And it started with Claude just being able to watch him work. And like he had so much domain expertise of 20 years of how to do this specific insurance company or this specific company or this or that. And I remember talking with him being like, hey, here's the deal. This is going to be really boring, but I need you to do this on behalf of your future self because we cannot automate what we can't see. And in his situation, because he worked with so many different insurance brokerages, right? He had a slightly different sharpened process for each one, but that process lived in his head. And so it was so fun. He actually called me yesterday and he's like, you're never going to believe what just happened. I was like, what? He's like, my agents just completed my first claim. I was like, what? He's like, yeah, he had been working for like 3 weeks to map everything. And then we used an old test case, like an old claim. And the agents went, and we had a team of, the execution agents. And then we had a QC agent or quality control agent that went and checked all the work. And it was like 144 pictures in like 4 minutes that it was able to properly label and tag and put into the end system that it needed to be in, which usually would have taken them like 4 to 5 hours. So it's exciting, but kind of coming back to this point, right? That work's not pretty. It's not sexy. It's not fun. But in order to set you up for future success, it really has to be done. And being able to also map the shadow processes, right? Like the nuance that happens when you're working with one hiring manager versus another hiring manager. John likes it this way and Tommy likes it this way, or Sarah likes it this way and Susan likes it that way, whatever it is, right? All of that domain expertise, if you don't capture that, you can't go and build the right thing,
Yeah, I've been a little knee deep in some of this type of work with my parents' chocolate company. So for those of you who might not know, my parents have a chocolate business, and a lot of the information sits in the heads of the staff because they are not a modern organization with a lot of tech. And so I'm trying to help them build out the right tools and templates and things that they need to be more successful and more efficient and better serve their customers. So that's been fun, but it's pulling that information out of people. I've been doing live interviews and recording and taking and using AI to help transcribe and pull everything together on a variety of topics. And it's been a lot of fun to try and really understand their processes so that I can help them optimize them. And I've done that for years within the TA functions that I've worked in. It's definitely not the most glamorous side of the work, but it's important because you have things like visas and mobility, as an example, that in most of the organizations that I've been in, that process has sat with one individual and it's in their head and in some spreadsheets. And that visa tracking and all of that is people's livelihoods. It's related to government. There's legal implications and personal implications with it. And if you don't get it right or you miss something, that could send someone home to their home country pretty quickly when they've got a life here in the States, or stop someone from being hired if you're not doing everything right.
Even more reason, right, to be able to make sure that we're mapping how the current state is so that we can it doesn't mean that we have to give that work to AI or an agent or a system, but let's say hypothetically we wanted to create some sort of, quality control layer that sat on top of that to make sure that if questions came in about the visas and they weren't getting responded to, that we would have an escalation path, right? Because in some of these situations, hope is not a strategy, right? Like when there is something that's truly affecting somebody, like for example, where they live and like anything government related, oftentimes there's a blueprint for how this needs to happen. And so we can't, hope that it's just going to go the right way. Perfect opportunity to deploy something that's going to make sure that the train continues to move and isn't stopped,
Another tech that I just saw was I had a conversation with Matt Ekstrom from Sync to Hire. And as Matt and I were talking, it went back. He worked at Hiring Solved, which was one of my favorite techs years ago that my sourcing team used. But again, a pretty complex system at the time that they were around. Now you have some other players in the market that to me just put AI on top of Hiring Solve, which probably just make it easier for the user. But Matt worked at Hiring Solved years ago. And so we must have crossed paths there, but just got reconnected through our buddy, John Zila. And so Jay-Z introduced me to Matt, but they're doing something interesting at Sync to Hire and I just got like a 5-minute demo, right? Like I want to dig into this tech more, but it sits on top of your ATS and it's gathering a lot of the conversations and work around the rec that don't happen in the ATS. So the communication.
It is a vehicle for what we're talking about here, which is being able to capture that work that's done outside of a system of record, but holding it somewhere and enabling the users to be able to get the stuff done right? Like experience layer technology is not new to our space. It's not as heavily adopted, but just for people who might not be aware, right? Like that's where we might have something like a Workday or an Oracle or an iCIMS or something, and we put a pretty wrapper or front door on the front end of it. And so our humans only have to interact with that front door. They don't have to actually make all the keystrokes in that an existing system of record, but anything that they do is moving it forward on the system of record. So it makes it a lot easier from a user experience
Not
standpoint.
everything belongs in the system of record for recruiting activity or hiring activity. And so being able to capture that and have record of some of that information, it's still discoverable, but you can keep some of those things separated. But it also, what they're doing, like my mind was going like, oh my gosh, because I was thinking about like compensation data. So whenever we're hiring people, we're talking to a lot of people, we're telling them where our ranges are. They may share with us where their expectations are, or we may be working with the compensation team on things that aren't always, if your ATS isn't part of your HCM, and if your company hasn't bought the compensation module of that HCM, all that data lives outside the system. And then you can't run analysis around where you're hiring, how you're hiring, what the market is saying. It's, I mean, yes, you can buy some of that data, but it's your real-time data and the conversations that you're having. And there's some baked in follow-ups that can nudge people on getting things done. There's a couple tools like Poetry, I think, lays on top of the ATS and does some of that as well. So there are some tech that's out there. This is just an area that's gotten me really excited lately around trying to identify some of the problems that are those one-off types of things, and how do we use AI and humans to track, identify, and solve for them?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, we're probably at about time for this conversation. But Julia, this has been so great. It's been awesome to talk with you about the work that lives outside of the system. And for those of you who are tuning in, make sure to like and follow this wherever you may be seeing it. If you have any questions, make sure to reach out to us. We'd love to hear from you. And until next time, I'm JCK.
And I'm Julia. This is the Missing Manual. Have a great day.